Welcome back. Do you remember this terrorist? Before he died waging jihad overseas, he worked at the airport in Minneapolis, Minnesota, cleaning planes for passengers just like you and me. This morning, months after that story first broke, we find out he wasn't alone. Tom Lydon, investigative reporter for Fox 9 in Minneapolis, has uncovered the disturbing new details. Good morning.
Good morning, Peter. You know, the context here is what's really so frightening. We have had 36 men, and in some cases women from the Twin Cities who have been recruited from here to go fight overseas for terror groups, including these three who worked at the airport. We've already told you about Abdurrahman Muhammad. He was the man who cleaned airplanes, also fueled them, had what's known as a SITA badge, a security clearance that gave him access to the airport tarmac as well as the airplanes. He died fighting for ISIS in Syria alongside Dan McCain, who is also from Minnesota. We also have learned of another man, Abdusalan Hussein Ali. He worked at a coffee shop. He was a barista at the Caribou here at the MSP airport. He would later die fighting for al-Shabaab. He became a suicide bomber about 3 years after he left Twin Cities International, and that followed on the heels of Shirwa Ahmed. Again, another man from Minneapolis. He was an airport cart driver at the airport. He would shuttle people from gate to gate. He ended up becoming the first American suicide bomber for al-Shabaab, again, about 3 or 4 years after he left the airport. The thing that this really underscores, and according to TSA documents, internal documents that we've obtained, is this kind of insider homegrown threat and the risk that someone from the airport could be recruited. In this case, it looks like they were radicalized after they left the airport and that the airport was never their intended target. But it really does underscore this insider threat at our airports, which even TSA says may be the #1 threat right now to aviation.
Hey, Tom, that's somewhere between disturbing and terrifying. What is the TSA doing now? What is the federal government doing now in terms of checking out employees in that airport and in airports across the country to make sure that we don't have that kind of high rate, that high suicide terror rate that we see in the Minneapolis airport?
Yeah, that's really the question, isn't it? You know, TSA says that they have a layered security that's redundant, that they do spot checks, that surprise is a real element of their security. But we talked to Ken Kasprisan, who is a former Assistant Secretary of Homeland Security, former head of TSA, not only nationally, but here as well. And he worries that while we do these federal background checks, you know, federal state databases, NCIC fingerprints, that it's not catching a lot. For one thing, about 25% of the 17,000 workers from our airport, they come from overseas. And a lot of the data that we have on them is really incomplete. Even birth dates are incomplete. And he says the other thing we're not doing, we're not checking known associates. We're not checking their name and whether they are associated with known radicals or known recruiters. He's afraid that kind of work is not being done currently.
Tom Lydon, great reporting, Fox 9. We really appreciate that. Really dramatic. Thank you so much.
Sure, you bet.